ECIIA Public Sector Committee. This is a committee of the ECIIA, that's the European Confederation of Institutes of Internal Audit. The Public Sector Committee was set up in 2018, and our objective is to promote good governance in the European public sector. We have a committee made up of representatives from different countries. Next slide, please. We have a program of work. The first piece of work that we completed was a paper on audit committees in the European public sector. This followed a survey in 12 nations and in the European Commission. We found some interesting results that in only 2 countries were audit committees mandatory in the public sector. I really recommend this publication to you, as we have had very good feedback, and it certainly has influenced the setting up of audit committees in a number of nations that didn't have them before. Next slide, please. We haven't got the slide, but the other activities that we're currently embarked upon. There are 3 projects. Reporting again. That's all I want to say in my introduction. I'd like to move on to the main purpose of the webinar now, and I would like to introduce our panel. We have Jens Motel, who's the ECI board member for Germany, Patrick de Boom, who works for the European Commission's Internal Audit Service, Joe Rowley, who's the Deputy Director for Audit Practice in the UK Government Internal Audit Agency, Massimo Proietti from IAA Italy, who's an expert and a teacher on audit-related issues, Soledad Llamas from Spain, who's the Head of Audit for the Madrid Water Organization, and Manfred Kraft, who's the Director General of the European Commission's Internal Audit Service. So I think you'll agree we have an expert panel of people to pose the questions and respond to your questions. So without further ado, we'll go on to the first question on the poll. And the first question is, how has your internal audit budget changed in the short term as a result of COVID-19? And there are 4 options. So please vote. Okay, this was the first question. Pascal, I'm not seeing the results. Here, thank you. Here we have the answers. So almost 2/3 of respondents say that their internal budget in the short term has stayed the same. And then we've got a rough split between increase, decrease, and not sure. My comment on this was I'm very pleased that it's staying the same, at least, but I think this is very much in the short term, and as things progress, we may see some different results. We're all aware of the great financial pressures that there are on our organisations, and there's going to be a lot of financial problems to address in the future, I believe. So let's hope that our budgets remain the same or even increase, because I think, as we will come on to, internal audit has a huge role to play in helping our organisations get through this crisis for the future. Right, let's move on to question 2. The question is, did you transfer staff to non-audit work? And here I will hand over to my colleague, Jens Motel.
Hello, good afternoon. I give you the second question. Did you transfer staff to non-audit work? And your chance is to vote yes or no. Now the votes are accepted. So we see a quite clear result of 20% yes and 80% no, which shows that internal audit work is still important to do in this period of time, and only a few experienced staff transfer to other kind of work. This is kind of surprising and not quite the same experience as we have in Germany, because due to Corona crisis, there are a lot of new tasks for the administrations. For example, hotlines for information, subsidies for small and medium enterprises to keep their business alive. And in these tasks, staff was needed and was transferred. So we would have a quite different picture, not the clear result of no transfers to other kind of work.
Thank you, Jens. We'll now go on to the question 3, please.
Okay.
How is your
This is Patrick speaking. In this particular...
Sorry, Patrick. Yeah. Over to you.
No, okay. In this case, we were interested in finding out what your experience is with auditing from a distance, of course, as a result of the confinement, which we probably all are in. So this can be either very positive, difficult, or simply impossible. So please, can we have your votes? Okay. I'm a bit surprised. Impossible, that is not a surprise at all. So still 50% have a difficult experience with auditing from a distance, but overall, I think we have still 49% either very positive or positive. Now, in our own experience in the internal audit service of the European Commission, we went immediately into teleworking and basically also in remote auditing for that purpose. And in the very beginning, there were a few issues with having a remote access and an operational system for more than 30,000 officials, which is about the number that the European Commission counts, or even more. But now, after 2 months, we must say that according to the echoes and the information we have gathered with little pulse surveys, we have quite a positive experience. Just on 3 aspects. when it comes to video and teleconferencing, maybe we can say it's almost the same as face-to-face. A big plus is that you save a lot of time and money. You don't have to move to the office, or you don't have to move to offices of auditees. And also, we make a much more advanced use of online tools, which has a positive impact on the minutes of the meetings, to give you one example. On the other hand, when it comes to meeting new auditees, people you haven't been working before with, that is a little bit less positive because, of course, you don't meet those people physically. Now, the use of emails is also it remains, first of all, the most common communication channel, but we gather that it's more structured now with the possibility, for example, to shortcut some minutes of the meetings, because since everything is being communicated over email, you have already this information on paper. You don't need to document that anymore. The downside of it is you need to prepare better. So your email becomes much closer to audit programs and minutes you need to have. So that would be email. Then, of course, digital exchange. Now we work with a program which is called Teammate, very well known in the internal audit profession. But we also use more the other options which we have, like connected platforms and SharePoint sites. Personally, with our team, we have it already since 3 years, but it's only now that we really heavily start to use those platforms. So that I can also see from our experience as a positive, as a plus. Now, in the commission itself, my last word, there was a recent pulse survey. There are going to be actually 3, 2 of them we had already. And it's very comforting that you read that colleagues continue to cope very well with the situation, and that in terms of productivity, it's a self-assessment, of course, but we are able to carry out, more than 86% says that they are very much able to carry out their duties and tasks as before, as ever. And that only 24% of the colleagues is absolutely dying to go back to the office. So there is no need to come back to the office by 75% of our colleagues. This is a figure which is commission-wide. So these are my views. Back to Melvin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Patrick. We'll now move on to question 4. How is your internal audit function addressing risk as a result of COVID-19? I'll pass you over now to Jo Rowley.
Hi everyone. Yeah, as Melvin says, really interesting to find out what your functions are doing as far as risk goes and how things have arisen from COVID-19. So there's a few options here if you would care to vote. There's, have you updated your audit plan? Are you identifying emerging risks? Are you reviewing risk assessments? Are you recommending remediation plans, or are you doing other things? And something just to ponder on as people are voting. We're finding that we have roughly 3 tiers of customers in the UK for central government. We have those customers who've been significantly affected by COVID-19. For example, our tax authority, our health and social care ministry, our ministry involved in benefits and pensions, and also our devolved governments. We have some ministries that are partially affected, so business, our Ministry of the Interior, and agriculture. And then we do have some areas that we service that are minimally affected, so the likes of our research institutes and some of our big transport projects. So it's a really varied picture for our customers to begin with as far as the risks around COVID go. Okay, oh, a lot closer than some of our previous polls, which is interesting to see. Interesting, I might have expected more people to have already been updating their audit plan, but it probably tells us something about how this has hit all of us, that we're having to react, you know, very quickly and not necessarily have time to do some of the formal things. Identifying emerging risks, reviewing risk assessments, they all make sense, as do others. The answers to D also chime in for me, because we've not yet got to the point ourselves in the UK where we're really thinking about remediation plans. In that area, we're very much thinking about making sure that records of decisions and key options that are taken and made by boards, so that if we do get to a point where we can roll back, we know what decisions were made and why, and we can think about how to unwind them in a sensible way. But I'm not surprised that most people are not there yet with full remediation plans. Just a little bit before I hand over on some of the things that we're doing in the risk assessment world. We are reviewing our audit plans in the Government Internal Audit Agency, and our most affected ministries are going on to, at maximum, a quarterly plan at the moment, because the risk profile is changing so quickly. We're also doing a lot of real-time assurance dealing with emerging risks, and that can be things like rapid risk assessments, key controls reviews. We're talking about a lot of post-payment assurance. I'm sure you, like us, are spending billions on various grants, loans to businesses, unemployment benefit, and we need to make sure that we get some assurance about those monies that have been put out there very quickly. We're seeing the emergence of the use of data analytics to help in looking at where the risks are and focus our work. And also, in our case, because we are one of the 2 countries that do have mandatory audit committees, we're trying to do work with audit committees and audit committee chairs to make sure that they understand their role and the questions that they should be asking in this very rapidly changing risk environment, especially around risk tolerance and risk appetite, which may well have changed.
Thank you very much, Jo. We'll move on to the next question. How has your audit plan changed as a result of COVID-19? And can I call on Massimo to lead this one, please?
Hello, good afternoon. We have 4 options also for this question, number 5. As your audit plan was changed as a result of COVID-19, A, reduce scope for some engagements, B, cancel some engagements, C, add new engagements, D, increase scope of sub-engagements. In the previous question, you told us that for the 30%, 32%, the audit plan was changed. So we could view with this question how the audit plan was changed. We ask for your response. Waiting for the answer, I said that in Italy we have an increased scope of engagement as a result, because we should verify compliance with the new law issued for COVID emergency. And in some cases, we add new engagements to cover also the cybersecurity risk and to verify compliance and the health and safety measure. The result that we have, the canceled some engagements is the first answer, with 52% of the percentage of the answer. And the second one is add new engagement and reduce 20%, reduce for some engagements, and increase some scope of some engagements 7%. I was surprised because I didn't think that we should cancel some engagement, but if this is the result, I wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. The next question we have is, in which areas has your audit effort increased as a result of COVID-19? Back to you, Joe.
Okay, so a number of options here. Are you looking at business continuity plans, cybersecurity, fraud, the cost base of your organisation, compliance with new regulations? We've just heard about that in Italy. Financial areas, human resources management, health and safety, and of course our old friend risk management. I think it's fair to say as you're voting that in the UK we're actually seeing a number of plans going into place that cut across a number of these areas, very much financial, cost and fraud considerations, and also because we're putting a lot of the projects out via the web, there are huge cybersecurity issues as well for us to look at, and obviously risk management underpins all of this. So it'd be interesting to see what results come back in from those who are participating. Again, unsurprising to see that 55% response there to business continuity plans. I think this has been a huge question for all of us. I know personally that I was very familiar with risk registers that had pandemic flu on them several years ago, but that seems to have dropped down the pecking order recently. I suspect it will be back in everybody's minds soon. And then a fair spread across the others. Have a look and see. It's interesting that compliance is higher than I might have expected. We're not doing as much compliance work in the UK yet. I think that will come when we start to see how the monies have been handled after they've gone out to recipients. Cost low down, but I think that's becoming more and more important to our finance ministries or the equivalent in municipalities as we go on, because I don't think anybody expected that things like the lockdown were going to last as long, and I suspect this will have a real impact on us. And of course the big winner down at the bottom, as we expected, risk management. We expect to look at that every year in our organisation, so it's no surprise to me to see that it's they're heading up everybody's main plans. Back to you, Melvin.
Thank you very much, Joe. Now we'll move on to question 7 and indeed question 8, which will be handled by Soledad. The first question: have you included any information regarding the impact of COVID-19 in your non-financial reporting? Over to you, Soledad.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Melvin. Good afternoon. Yes, this is the question. Have you included any information regarding the impact of COVID-19 in your non-financial reporting? Please give your opinion, yes or no. In Spain, we analyzed 23 public companies and 35 private companies that who usually publish non-financial reporting. And I'm going to give you the result of this analysis. We're going to see the answers. Wow, half and a half. Yeah, more or less the half have included this information and the other half haven't. Okay, maybe these results are because your company published this information before the pandemic or haven't published yet this information. The analysis that we did in Spain, we analyzed 23 public companies and 35 private companies. In the public sector, only one of the 23 companies has published non-financial reporting and hasn't mentioned anything about coronavirus. Nevertheless, 25 of the 35 private companies have published non-financial reporting, of which 7 have a specific section on coronavirus. Maybe these results are due to some companies haven't published their information before the pandemic. Okay, next question, question 8. Do you think next year a specific section regarding the impact of COVID-19 will be included in your non-financial reporting? Please give your opinion, yes or no. Okay, we can see the results because I think it's an easy answer. Okay, yes. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, totally agree. Next year, all non-financial reporting should explain how companies have responded to the coronavirus, because this information is relevant to all areas of non-financial reporting: human resources, risk response, politics, and indicators. Okay, thank you very much. Additional information, EuroSci and ECIIA project. Maybe we can see the slides could be good, but it's no essential. Okay, thank you, Pascal. Okay, as Melvi told you before, we have a common project with EuroSci, non-financial reporting in the public sector in Europe. We have 3 surveys: non-financial reporting, integrating reporting general, and integrating reporting specific. As you can see, the maximum number of answers we have received are 64 answers from 84 countries. Yeah, and you can see similar results in the other surveys. We have received answers from, and we can share to the other slide, please. Yeah, we can receive this answer from ECIIA contact person, people from EuroSci, and other colleagues from the European public sector. With the result, we could have a global and very complete view of this topic in Europe, and specific in the public sector. We will share with you these results, answering some questions as: how did your country transpose the European directive into national law? Is there a specific obligation for the public sector? Are there ongoing initiatives in your country to promote integrating reporting in the public sector? Or which standards are applicable to the reporting on non-financial information? And the next steps, we have 3 steps. First of all, the webinar in June to discuss all the results of this survey. Final report at the end of July. And last but not least, the conference in autumn. I hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Soledad. The next session, we finished the questions on the polling questions, at least the preset questions, but I'm sure you're asking loads of questions as we speak. I'd like you now to pass on to Manfred Kraft, who, as I said earlier, is the Director General of the European Commission Internal Audit Service. I'm very pleased to have Manfred speaking at this afternoon's webinar. Over to you, Manfred. Hello?
Oh.
Hello, Manfred.
Hello.
You're there.
Good afternoon, everybody. For me, it's very interesting to, first of all, hear the results of the polls. And I have to say, we as IAS and the European Commission, we are in very good company. Either we went in the direction of the majority of those that voted, or we were close to the majority. And I want to underline that the work of the Commission, the internal work of the Commission, is progressing extremely well. You know probably that our president, Mrs. von der Leyen, she wanted to turn the Commission in a digital institution, and I think we managed very well crisis. Let me concentrate in what I want to tell you more on the external aspects as regards the European Commission. The internal aspects you dealt already with in the polls. And you know that the European Commission is, if you want, so the executive of the European Union. It's important to know as well that the European Union has no responsibility or no competence in the area of health. This is the responsibility of the member states. So in the beginning, you could see action in our 27 member states, whereas the Commission was more concentrating on trying to coordinate and then also now to prepare the reply to COVID-19. For example, today our president is in the European Parliament to present a package which deals with tourism in order to explain how we could return back to normal in this area. On top of that, the European Commission uses its budget, which represents roughly 1% of the EU GNI, and also the new multi-annual financial framework, which will be covering the period 21-27. In these contexts, the European Commission tries to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. And I want to quote a document which was adopted in April, which was titled Corona Response, using every available euro in every possible way to protect lives and livelihoods. This is quite a title, but it is really the program of what the Commission is doing now. First of all, in order to enable our societies, the institutions going back to normal, but also to prepare the recovery of the economy. And there is a remarkable sentence in this communication, which says, in the face of such a crisis, the greatest risk of all is the policy of being too cautious or too rigid. So I repeat, the greatest risk of all is the policy of being too cautious or too rigid. This is quite a statement. And especially when you think about that we are trying to protect lives and livelihoods, it's not surprising. But of course, this has implications. So I want to explain to you what our Parliament, the European Parliament, said concerning this program of the Commission. The Parliament said that it will cooperate with the other EU institutions to save lives, protect jobs and business, and drive economic and social recovery. But at the same time, it underlined that it will stand ready to hold them, that means the other European institutions, in particular the Commission, accountable for their actions. So accountable for their actions is the key question for me in this respect. And they continue to say, they acknowledge the need to mobilize additional funds in a fast and non-bureaucratic way to help member states to meet the needs for fighting against COVID-19 and its consequences. But at the same time, the Parliament also underlines that potential misuse of such funds need to be investigated with enforceable sanctions once the immediate crisis has ended. And in the light of these statements of the European Parliament, it is very clear that we as Internal Audit Service of the European Commission have to position ourselves. Therefore, we are carrying out a first assessment of the risks linked to COVID-19, now in parallel to the update of our audit plan. And we will carry out an in-depth risk assessment as regards the implication of COVID-19 up to the end of the year. And we will also coordinate with our management in order to ensure that the first, the second, and the third line of defense have a consistent reply to what is happening at the moment. And I don't want to analyze together with you all of the risks that we see for the moment. I just want to give you a slight overview on some risks regarding internal control, the reliability of the accounts, so the true and fair view of our financial statements, then the compliance with the legal framework, and also performance. You all know that all institutions of the world, including external and internal auditors, have logistical problems at the moment in order to carry out their work, especially when they have to do audits on the spot. We saw that there are possibilities to do remote auditing or auditing from a distance. Nevertheless, some elements can only be checked, for example, in the offices of beneficiaries. So we see issues as regards the assurance that we will get and that we will have as regards compliance, and also as regards the performance of our policies. In the area of the reliability of the accounts, we see some challenges, but we think in the end, there will not be any issue as regards their reliability. There could be an issue with the control concept on the accounting treatment of some very innovative instruments that will be probably applied to fight the crisis. The biggest issue I see in the context of compliance and performance. First of all, let me start with compliance. I'm pretty sure that I'm in good company when I say that there will be financial and economic difficulties as regards our beneficiaries. A lot of companies, a lot of individuals will have solvency problems. So there might be an issue with finalizing projects which were co-financed and therefore also delivering results and documents. Then the Commission also lightened certain control and audit procedures in order to help the national authorities to cope with the issues as regards the crisis. This could lead, as I said, to a weakened assurance. There will be revised and new delivery models. This will always imply a risk. There will also be new eligibility rules with new risks. People are not yet used to them. And last but not least, the corrective capacity of our system will also be affected. What does this mean, corrective capacity of our systems? We have multi-annual systems which make sure that over the lifetime of the implementation of programs or projects, issues, errors that are identified or weaknesses that are identified are corrected, either by imposing financial corrections or asking beneficiaries to reimburse money. If beneficiaries are bankrupt or in financial difficulties, this will of course have an impact on the effectiveness of these corrective systems. Now, another extremely important issue is linked to performance. We all know that we have an unprecedented crisis, a real disruption, something that we have never seen since the big crisis in the 20s, 30s of last century. So many of the baselines and the milestones, as well as the targets, will be obsolete. We have to reanalyze them. We have to fix new targets, new milestones, in order to adapt our performance indicators to the reality. And of course, there will be an important issue when it comes to exactly determining the impact of our subventions or of our grants, subsidies, as regards the impact on society, because a lot of actions are also taken at the level of the member states. If you add together the financial packages of the 27 member states in order to help companies, beneficiaries, etc., to survive this crisis, you reach a percentage of 22% of GNI. 22% of GNI are used in order to help the economy to recover. That means, of course, that it will be very difficult, for example, to isolate the impact of one specific institution. In our case, it would be the European Commission, to find out what really has happened, what is the result, what is the impact of the aid that was granted. In any case, together with the management, we will make sure that we will have a clear identification of the existing inherent risks, of the residual risks identified by management, and we will also identify whether this risk has to be accepted or not, because either the objectives are priority or because resources are missing. And then in the last step, it has to be discussed with the European Parliament and the Council, what are the political implications of the fact that some of the risks had to be accepted and could not be mitigated. I want to leave it to that, and I'm of course available to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Manfred. Okay, so now we have a session to answer the questions that you may have been asking during this webinar. Pascal, have we had questions?
Yes, we did. So one question maybe that came different times, people wanted to know how many people were answering the question. And we had on average about 170 people answering, for your information.
Thank you.
Then a first question, Melvin, are there any auditor who had audited pandemic risk before Corona? And question number two, does some of you include pandemic risk in their risk register before COVID-19?
Okay, sorry, what was the first question? Could you repeat the first question, please?
Yes, are there any auditor who had audited pandemic risk before COVID-19?
Okay, rather than asking the panel specifically, can anyone answer if they have covered this? No, I don't think we're getting any replies. No,
no experience. Then does some of you had it in the risk register before COVID-19? Say yes, please.
Well, I think I'll answer. I mean, in some organizations I've been with, we had pandemic risk indeed as a risk, but the magnitude of this was not what was envisaged, I think. I think we thought about pandemic risk as a short-term problem, and the answer was to build contingency plans, which of course aren't robust enough to withstand the magnitude of exactly what has happened.
Melvin, may I?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. A little bit the same for us in the European Commission. We had the pandemic risk in our business continuity plans. But to be very honest, Melvin and all the others, when I read for the first time the IAS business continuity plan, and I saw this reference to pandemic risk, I said, very interesting, but will surely not happen. So you see how somebody can be taken by surprise. I think an interesting question would also be, how long time did it take us from really knowing what is going on since the first information that we got in December from China until we then reacted in Europe and everywhere else? I think that would also be interesting. I can talk, for example, for us, our audit plan 2020 was prepared also in consultation of our managers, etc., before the outbreak of the crisis. But it is also true that the first information before I adopted it wasn't on our radar screen. But then you could ask me, why did I not really take it into consideration in our own audit plan? And I think you gave the answer, Mervyn, because I think nobody really could imagine what would happen in reality only a few weeks later.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think on the typical risk registers that we have, I think we would have had the impact of this coronavirus as extremely high, but I think we would have had the likelihood not very high. And that therein lies the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else like to comment?
Melvyn, it's Jo. Could I chip in?
Yes, please.
To my knowledge, I think the only people I'm aware of in the UK who have, certainly in central government, who've probably got any experience around this is our Department for International Development, because they did a lot of work when you had the Ebola crisis in West Africa. So they do have some experience of having to audit under those conditions and audit those conditions. I think the other thing that this is probably straying into politics, so I need to be careful, is that our National Health Service, which is of course part of the public sector in the UK in the way that we run our healthcare, did a big review 2 or 3 years ago where they demonstrated very clearly that our hospitals couldn't cope during a pandemic, but the politicians chose to ignore it. So a lot of the warning signs were out there, but none of us seem to have picked up on it as we should have done.
Yes, thank you, Jo. Pascal.
Next question.
Other questions.
Which type of audit did you include in your plan because of COVID-19?
Okay. Volunteers to answer? Yeah, come on, Fred.
Yeah, thank you very much. I speak on the basis of our discussion, which we had in our Audit Progress Committee last week. They, of course, asked me, what is the impact of COVID-19 on the plan? And I said, well, we carry out a first assessment of the risks because the document that I referred to in my intervention includes 140 different measures. Of course, they are not yet implemented, but they are proposed to be adopted by the European Council and the European Parliament. So we will carry out I would call it an intelligent reading of everything what is proposed in order to see is the design effective in order to deal with the issues that are on the table. And on the basis of this analysis, we will then continue this in-depth risk assessment in order to eventually audit whether services, member states authorities are prepared in order to implement these measures efficiently and effectively. And also we will analyze whether management mitigates the risks that exist. If not, I think we really have to analyze very carefully what is the level of risk that is acceptable in such an unprecedented crisis. And then there must be, as a next step, a political dialogue with the public authorities, Parliament, Council, that supervise, that scrutinize our work.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment from the panel? No? Next question, Pascal.
Last question, actually, Melvyn, if you don't mind, because time is running.
Thank
and
you.
it is for you, Soledad. So somebody is asking, what are the services in your company? And also, what is the role internal audit has played in your company?
Okay, thank you, Pascal. Okay, Canal de Isabel II is a public entity that provides water to more than 6.5 million people in Madrid. Our goal is to supply water in quantity and quality, no? And maybe this is the question, no? And now it's more essential because maybe you can think you can wash your hands if you don't have water. And maybe this is why our company now is really, really important. For this reason, during these first weeks of the crisis, my company focused on this important issue, water service. And at this time, internal audit function step aside. Now we think that we are not essential in this moment. Now, in the following these first weeks, we started to work in advisory capacity. No? We think about what is the most important, for example, advice, evidence of the decision, for example, or identifying risk when we return to work. Yeah, in my opinion, our current function is to assurance and advise the board of directors. And in a few months' time, we will analyze the company response as internal audit. This is our function now, and this is our function in the next time.
Thank you very much, Soledad. Okay, as we're getting near the time, it remains for me to make a few closing remarks. Well, can we have the final slides, please, Soledad? Pascal. Okay, a summary of this webinar will shortly be available on the site on here. A public sector committee is also setting up a LinkedIn to which you'll all be invited. So there'll be more information coming out. So please tune into those. And the final slide, Pascal. That's just details of our website. My closing comments. Well, COVID has changed the way we all live and the way we all work. The trouble is no one knows when this will all be over. When it is all over, no doubt there are going to be huge lessons to be learnt. Talking about roles for internal audit, I think we may have a very important role in the exercise of lessons to be learnt. Normal as we know it, I think is gone forever. I think we'll be into new ways of working now and new ways of appreciating what's going on in the world. The risk profile impacted by COVID has undoubtedly changed forever. There's likely to be huge financial risks in the future, as many of my colleagues have mentioned. In the private sector, it's going to be very much a question of survival. In the public sector, we've got huge financial problems to address. I'll finish with 3 simple messages, bearing in mind my closing comments. I think to all internal auditors, never before has this role of trusted advisor been more important. It's something we've always strived to be. Well, now's the time to really show our value and become the trusted advisor. The businesses, our authorities, our government departments all need our expertise and help. Please help them. Secondly, all auditors, in particular heads of internal audit, there's never been a time like this to communicate, not only to your clients, customers, but also to your teams. Remote working is very difficult. It's very important to communicate, hear what people are saying, make sure this is two-way. And the final message, which is a very simple one, is thank you for all attending and keep safe. I'd like to thank all of the panel and all of the speakers and all the participants to this webinar. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.